What's going on, Packers fans? Aaron Nagler here, joined by Mark Oldacres, a Cheesehead TV contributor living across the pond. How's the world watching the Euros this summer? Anybody who's watched this channel knows that I'm obsessed, but I'm guessing you're probably enjoying it as well.
Yeah, it's been good. I mean, England getting off to a good start definitely helped. It wasn't the most entertaining game, but they won, and that's the main thing. Just win the
That's all
game.
that matters. Get the points,
Yeah,
and then hopefully continue on into the knockout stage. But obviously,
yeah.
Cheesehead TV fans probably not too interested in the Euros. We're going to get down to brass tacks here. You wrote an article for Cheesehead TV about potential breakout players. Obviously, the Packers heading into a season where suddenly they're expected to do pretty damn well after the run to the playoffs last year. Most people, I think, expect the Packers to make some noise, at least in the playoffs, if not making a push for a title. Um, if they're going to do that, they're going to have some players either step up, break out, whatever term you want to use. And you highlighted a number of them on Cheesehead TV recently. Let's just kind of go through it here. Guys that you think potentially could break out and really help the Packers get over that hump. Starting with a wide receiver. And it's funny because you say a wide receiver, that could be a lot of different guys, but
Could be anyone.
You have one guy in particular in mind.
Yes, yeah. So I went with Christian Watson, and this was a really difficult decision. When I was going through this exercise, I kind of realized that I'd probably given myself a difficult task by saying five only, but I wanted to kind
Right.
of keep it tight. But
Sure.
yeah, like especially at wide receiver, I was like, well, I'm definitely choosing a wide receiver, but like which one am I going to choose?
Right. Yep.
And I came down on Watson in the end just because kind of all things being equal with health and opportunity there, he has the highest ceiling still, I believe, of any receiver in this group, just because of the raw athleticism that he has. That's kind of unique that the rest of the guys don't really have. Not that they're bad athletes, but nobody has his speed. And I just think the opportunities that come with that, and also what he has shown in the spells where he's been healthy. Obviously, the kind of run he went on towards the end of his rookie year, and then even kind of the few weeks when he was healthy before he got injured again against Kansas City last season. You could just see the difference that he makes when he's on the field. I felt harsh again against like a Dontavian Wicks is probably the other one that I gave a big consideration to. And even Jaden Reed as well. Like he just set the rookie record for
Broke Sterling
Packers
Sharp's record.
receptions.
Yep.
Yeah,
No
exactly.
doubt.
Right. So it's a really it's difficult, and it could be any of them. And if it's any one of them, then great. But I think Watson still has the kind of the most star potential of the group.
I very much agree there. What I'm fascinated to watch, because I do think I agree with you that of the group, and they're all pretty damn special, but of the group, he is probably set to have kind of the biggest year. Of course, the caveat is if he stays healthy. But I'm fascinated to see how do defenses start to react, because we haven't had outside of that stretch, the end of his rookie year, and even then, that was just what, a handful. That was 8 games. What happens if he does come out of the gate like totally gangbusters, putting up touchdowns every week? Do defenses start to react? Do they start trying to like roll coverage towards him and take him away? And how does he respond to that? I do think the potential for a breakout is very legit, but I do wonder how defenses will respond, because we've seen how he can completely alter games. And if he starts doing that on a regular basis, you got to think defensive coordinators will adjust.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's going to be the kind of the interesting part of this season is that I think again, if the Packers have all their receivers available and he's out there on the field, I think naturally, if you had to ask opposing defensive coordinators who's the guy they're
Right.
doubling, if they're going to double anyone, it's going to be him, just because
Yeah.
he has the potential to score a touchdown on any play, just
Yes.
because of how he can take the top off. Whereas the rest of the guys on the team, you're not kind of as worried about that. So whether he can take a step to where he can not only draw double coverage but actually still succeed and beat it is going to be the big thing of whether he takes that step and becomes a true kind of star receiver. But regardless, for the Packers, whether it's him actually being able to do that or whether he draws that coverage and that opens up one-on-ones for the rest of the guys on the field, I'm really excited about just kind of, I think game to game, week to week, there's going to be one guy probably who has the
Right.
opportunity to go off because they're not thinking about him, because they can't think about everybody, because there's just so many weapons on this Packers team.
Absolutely. And speaking of weapons, you highlight another pass catcher, though not a wide receiver. This time at the tight ends position. You're highlighting Luke Musgrave. Why Musgrave over Kraft, and what do you expect from the tight end in his second season in the NFL?
Yeah, this is another one. It's just so tough because I love Kraft and I preferred Kraft coming into the league. But Musgrave, again, I think I've just given the nod to that kind of the extra gear, just kind of unique athleticism that he has. I mean, Tucker Kraft is a freak athlete in his own right, but the kind of speed, the pure speed that Musgrave has to go with the size at the tight end position is kind of very rare. And I think they're both going to have good seasons. Obviously, it's probably hurt Kraft a little bit as well with the pec injury. That might have just dinged
Right.
him where you think, okay, is he going to have a slow start to training camp? And then maybe because of that, a slow start to the season. But I think with Matt LaFleur as their head coach, I think these tight ends are going to get, and like we talked about, the receivers that teams have to worry about as well as Josh Jacobs in the backfield. I think the tight ends are going to get some really good looks. And I think they're going to be schemed up really well by LaFleur to get open and get in advantageous positions. And Musgrave especially, if he can stay on his feet, but that's a big part of it after the catch. But
That's the
if you get him
caveat. Yeah.
in situations where he can run by people before the catch, then a lot of that's not going to matter anyway.
It's interesting too, because I very much agree with this assessment as far as even if Kraft wasn't dealing with the pec injury. Looking back at last summer, we saw so many practices at training camp where they were running plays for Musgrave, plays where Musgrave was the primary receiver, things where they're running coverage off and dragging him underneath to utilize that speed, things where they're running rub routes at the line of scrimmage to get him free in space to utilize that speed. I just think they understand the weapon he can be, right? There's no way that if you're a defensive coordinator, you're thinking, well, unless you've got an incredibly special athlete on your defense, like maybe a Fred Warner, but outside of that, you are not matching up with him one-on-one. You're just playing with fire by doing so. So I think the Packers will use that to every advantage they can. And I think trying to utilize kind of more two tight end sets, we've heard LaFleur talk about wanting to kind of add to his playbook in that regard. Again, I think if you're a defensive coordinator, you're really picking your poison at that point. And yeah, Musgrave's going to make some people pay. I don't think there's any question there.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think, again, Kraft is going to be more of that kind of over his time in Green Bay. I see him as more of that kind of, he's just going to be the super, almost reliable guy, but not the guy who's going to maybe have the big plays like Musgrave is. So I think that's just the reason that I think he's just got maybe a little bit of a higher ceiling.
And then we flip over to the defensive side of the ball. And goodness knows, Mark, if there's a team in need of some breakouts on the defensive side of the ball, it's the Green Bay Packers. And you start at the defensive line. And I am interested in your take here because I think I am excited for this player. But man, there just seems to be, I don't know, something about his play so far in the league. Devontae Wyatt's been in the league for a couple years now. And you would have thought probably the light would have come on towards the end of last year. And I think we did see improvement, but I don't think we've seen what the Packers expected, given that they selected him in the first round and he was a much older player than they typically like to select in the draft, especially early. I think, hey, if the scheme turns something on, great. What do you see with Wyatt heading into year 3?
Yeah, I think it's a mixture of things. I totally agree. And this is kind of what I said in the article as well about is that he's been a disappointment so far, only because I think, again, fairly or not, I think the age kind of impacts that because like he's 26 years old now already.
Right.
I think he was nearly 24 when they drafted him. And it hasn't yet at that age you're kind of expecting, and I liked him, as a player coming into the league, but my kind of feeling was, okay, well, when you're drafting this guy at the age he is and what you see on the tape is he'll be able to come in and kind of be a disruptive force right away. And that was kind of, for me, what you're hoping for or expecting if you're going to take a player of his age in the first round. That hasn't really happened. Last season, I think he was much more disruptive, though. I think the consensus on the season he had would have been a lot different if he just finished a few plays here and there.
That's the thing, especially early in the year. He seemed to miss, I think there were at least 3 sacks off the top of my head that he had available, and he just missed the quarterback. The quarterback stepped out of his grasp, where if he finishes those, I'm with you. I think the perception of his year is probably a little different.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. So I think you look at those plays, you look at his best plays, and his best plays are as good as anything you'll see, from a defensive lineman, because he has that just explosiveness and disruptive ability. And kind of all we've heard from Jeff Hafley himself, not just us on the outside trying to kind of guess what's going to happen with this defensive scheme from him, is that the defensive lineman, he doesn't want them thinking too much. He doesn't want them trying to play two gaps. He wants them to get up the field, disrupt, get through the line of scrimmage and create havoc and kind of not just worry about it. And there's probably negative plays that are going to come with that. I'm sure there are from this aggressive kind of approach. But I think for a player like Wyatt, just telling him to use the gifts that he has, not overthink things and just kind of try and cause disruption is going to be hopefully good for him and help him just kind of really take that step in his third season to what we kind of all hoped he would be by now already.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And speaking of agreement, the next guy on your list, I 100% agree, to the point where I made a video already this offseason, probably right at the start of the offseason, where I said Quay Walker is set to be a star. And I know there are misgivings about his play, his inconsistencies at times. But, man, I'm telling you, in this scheme, what he's going to be asked to do sideline to sideline, his athletic ability, his upside, I think his play on the field so far has been a lot better than most fans give him credit for. I think, yeah, I'm with you. Like here, I think it's not a question of, is he going to break out? I think he's going to break out. He's going to break out big. He's going to be very productive. And I am very excited to watch Quay Walker in 2024.
Yeah, and that has to be the hope, right? Because again, this is kind of like a lot of the things I said about Wyatt, I could say about Walker. Obviously, they were both first round picks in the same draft as well. And Walker just kind of in the first 2 years probably hasn't really. And I think the expectation with him was that he might come along a little slower because he wasn't even really, kind of a full-time player or a huge difference maker at Georgia. But that obviously all the physical tools were there, but it hasn't really happened yet. I think even last season, if he took steps forward, I don't think it was anything super significant or really that encouraging. But again, I just think I don't think enough can be said about how Joe Barry's defense kind of stifled a lot of these guys.
Neutered guys, you can say it. You're among friends.
Yeah. And I know people, there's an element of you can't just blame everything on that, but I'm going to give these guys the benefit of the doubt that it really was that different, that it really was kind of holding them back that much until I see otherwise. And I think Walker, if he can just get into a mode where he's attacking downhill, and again, he's not having to think about a million things. I know he's going to be, wearing the green dot most likely and communicating on the defense there, but even still, I just think that they were just had so much on their plate. And even Devondre Campbell, famously talked about a lot of things after he left. But he said about, Quay will be fine. They just have him thinking way too much. Like the linebackers in Green Bay for too long have just been cleanup crew, basically, and just tasked with whatever leaks through the line. That's your job, rather than actually trying to dictate anything.
Especially in pass coverage. Like you've seen so many plays where I was just watching one of the games yesterday, and it was that classic slow crosser, and we're passing it off. Wait, I thought you had him, and a guy breaks open wide open. It happened like 3 or 4 times last year. Quay was involved in a couple of those. And I just think, yes, to your point, like you can't blame everything on the coordinator. Obviously, Quay has to make the plays that are available to him. But I do think this scheme, and like you're saying, the ability to kind of streamline what's being asked of him and let his God-given abilities take over. I just think it's going to be like watching Dorothy land in Oz and open that door and things are going to be in color where they've been in black and white before. I believe in Quay Walker in a big, big way. And I think he's set to have a huge year. And look, there's no doubt that, as you said at the start, the idea of a breakout, right? And you wrote it in your piece. It's not like every one of these guys has to break out for this to work, right? Like it could be one, it could be a couple of them. But for me, especially on the defensive side of the ball, this has to happen. Like they need their inside backer to be really, really good. I don't need him to be an all-pro, but for so long, we've watched the Green Bay Packers defense have issues in the middle, right? And Madden famously said it. It's an old football adage. You want your defense to be strong up the middle. You want your defensive tackle, your inside backer, and your safety. Well, they've got Kenny Clark, and they've got Xavier McKinney. They need that middle solidified, and I think Quay will be the man to do it.
Yeah, and it's his time, and going back to what you said as well, a breakout can mean different things for different players, too. It doesn't all have to mean that they're instantly an all-pro, like a breakout for Watson is probably different than it is for Walker, because Watson's kind of has had stretches of elite play before. So it's about doing it more consistently. Whereas Walker just has to become kind of the leader of that linebacker core. And you just, like you said, you just don't want to see kind of the amount of miscommunication and just like absolute like just confusion on the back end and starting with the linebacker core. So it's just about him stepping up, being that leader, and just being, if nothing else, just really consistently solid this year.
Yep. And I like I said, that's what I'm expecting. And then finally, your last breakout candidate here is at the cornerback position. And I mean, this is interesting to me because I love Carrington Valentine. I think he put a lot of good stuff on tape last year. I think he also put some stuff on tape that shows how you can take advantage of him. And I'm fascinated to see how he responds to, needing to make those steps forward to improve his game, but also how teams and players, opponents who have spent the offseason really studying his game, try to take advantage of him. What do you see from Valentine entering his second year in the league?
Yeah, I think with him, I mean, it seems like from kind of the OTAs in minicamp, he's been the talk of Green Bay in terms of the coaching staff. Like anyone you can get hold of has got good things to say about how he's came back, from last season, how he's put on weight in the off season, and he's not so skinny now. He can compete physically better with receivers. And I just think his style of defense, of coverage, which is so aggressive, so physical, combined with the new scheme, combined with the fact he's put on a little weight, he's into that second season. He definitely took his lumps last year, and there was good moments and some really bad moments as well. But I just think everything you hear is that he's competing so hard and for that second spot along opposite Jair. And I think kind of just overall on the cornerback group, which was and possibly still is obviously kind of a concern in terms of it's not settled in terms of who's going to be starting, who's going to be doing what. I think suddenly with Stokes back and the reports seem kind of good on Stokes that he's yet back to full health, like ready to go. I know it's cliche, but best shape of his life, all this stuff. Right. And then you've got Keyshawn, you've got Kalen King coming in. I think all of a sudden, I think we could be looking at the cornerback kind of battle in training camp and saying they've got good options here across the board, and kind of whoever starts, we feel okay about it. So yeah, with Valentine, I just think it's all those things combined that he's just going to take that step, and it would not surprise me at all if he just wins that job outright as the second corner. I think he's already proven that 7th round pick status was crazy, really. Even based on what he did last year in limited action. But I think everything just looks right for him to kind of really take a step and become a player that people are talking about.
Couldn't agree more. His Mark Oldacres checking in from across the pond. You can read his piece at CHTV.com. Link is in the description of the video. Mark, thank you so much for the time, man.
No worries. Always good to talk to you, Aaron.